Canada's steel and aluminum industry is bracing for a seismic hit from U.S. President Donald Trump. As we've been telling you, the White House confirmed to CBC News yesterday that it will stack those tariffs on top of the other levy being imposed on all Canadian imports, something that will deliver a hammer blow to this country's economy. The CBC's Mark Carcassol is looking into that. We could be potentially looking at 50% tariffs on aluminum and steel. Break it down for us. What does this all mean?
Tariffs on tariffs on tariffs, essentially, Arthi. If, again, the worst case scenario plays out, and I always like to say that from the beginning, there's a lot of people that feel as though this is a negotiating tactic by Donald Trump. That's why he gave us the 30-day reprieve on the general tariffs, and that's why he pushed the implementation of these steel and aluminum tariffs until March 4th. So the reprieve on general tariffs expires on March 12th. We'll see where things go from there. But as you mentioned, Arthi, if all of these tariffs were to go through, some items could be subject to tariffs as high as 50%. This coming from what an official in Washington told a CBC journalist yesterday who was looking for clarification. Factor in the potential for 50 to 100% tariffs on Canadian cars that President Trump was musing about the other day. And it just makes for what could be an absolute catastrophe economically for both the U.S. and Canada. And that is why many people feel as though this is sort of a negotiation tactic, because there's people looking at this saying, how can Donald Trump do this and threaten this and not know the impact that it would have on his own economy? It could lead to inflation, which could lead to higher interest rates and just slower U.S. economic growth. When it comes to inflation, we already know that numbers just came out earlier this morning that show that in January, inflation jumped unexpectedly to 3% in the U.S. Consumer prices rose 0.5%. That's the largest single month rise in the U.S. since September of 2023. So many analysts are looking at this and saying that this is just bluster on the president's part because he can't afford to do this just as much as his trading partners like ourselves can't afford to do this. Now, earlier in the day, you spoke to Francois Racine. He's the CEO of Alu Quebec. He says that essentially he's concerned, he's mindful, but he's not too worried because he feels that if Canada can't get its, or rather if the U.S. won't take Canada's steel and aluminum, other places will.
At some point, if the metal doesn't go in the U.S., it will go elsewhere. We have a global balance market. We produce about 70 million tons a year globally and consume 70 million tons a year. So a little bit like the Russian sanction. I mean, the Russian metal stopped coming to North America and Europe, but went elsewhere. And the same would eventually happen.
And this all comes as well as the CEO of Ford Motors tells investors yesterday that if President Donald Trump's tariffs on Canada and Mexico were to go through, it would devastate the auto manufacturing industry in the U.S. He says it would essentially blow a hole in the U.S. industry and give free rein to car makers in Europe, Japan, and South Korea. Arthi.
Thanks for this, Mark. That is the CBC's Mark Carcassol reporting.